Today marks 10 years since the first Apple Watch went on sale on April 24th, 2015. Since then, Apple has sold over 200 million smartwatches, and way back in 2015, it wasn't even called the Series 1 or anything weird like that. It was just simply called the Apple Watch. I actually remember buying this watch for my wife. Not that she really loved it, she actually ended up giving it away, but in a lot of ways, the original Apple Watch wasn't too different than what we have today. It was launched with a capacitive touchscreen, 2 sizes, a digital scroll wheel, interchangeable watch bands, and an optical heart rate sensor on the back. I actually do remember reading about that optical heart rate sensor and how Apple had trouble reading the heart rate of people with tattoos. The media called it Tattoo Gate. But basically, some tattoo ink was absorbing some of the LED light from the optical heart rate sensor and causing some people to have bad heart rate readings and even being locked out of their watches completely while wearing the device. I don't think it was a huge deal, but Apple did address it when they released 2 editions of the Apple Watch on September 16th of 2016. They introduced the Series 1 Apple Watch, which was basically just an updated processor on the Apple Watch, and the Series 2 that was twice as bright. It was 1,000 nits. It had water rating for 20 meters for swimming, and it had built-in GPS, so you could run with it without your phone. And this was the first year that Apple partnered with Nike with a watch that they called the Apple Watch Nike Plus. It was basically a Series 2 and some exclusive run-focused watch faces. And by the end of that same year, Apple was estimated to have sold about 11.9 million watches, meaning that the Apple Watch overtook Rolex to become the #1 watch in the world by revenue and by popularity. Now, on September 22nd, 2017, Apple launched the Series 3, and the big new feature was built-in cellular. For the first time, the Apple Watch could function independently of the iPhone for calls, for text, or for data. And all of these watches up until this point were offered in 2 sizes, so a 38mm edition and a 42mm size, but this was the first time that there was also a cellular option of each of those sizes. The non-cellular options seemed like it was just called the GPS edition, but either way, the Series 3 also received a barometric altimeter for tracking elevation gains and also for tracking floors climbed. With watchOS 4, Apple also added the option to alert you if your heart rate was unexpectedly high when you were inactive, which I think is maybe, in some ways, a bit of foreshadowing of all of the health alerts and metrics that Apple would just dive into over the years as this watch continued to evolve. Now, on September 21st, 2018, Apple announced the Series 4 device. It was the first real design change of the Apple Watch. Nothing massive, but the display was 30% larger, and it went edge to edge, and it had more of that thinner bezel and those curved corners. And then this was the first time that Apple bumped up its sizes. The Series 4 came in a 40mm size and a 44mm size. Apple also updated the accelerometer and the gyroscope, which allowed for a new fall detection feature, where if the watch detected a fall and you didn't respond, it could actually reach out and try to contact emergency services on your behalf. And then this is also when Apple introduced ECG capabilities, where your watch could actually perform an AFib detection and alert users to abnormal heart rhythms. And then on September 20th, 2019, Apple introduced the Series 5. And I actually remember thinking that this was a good time for people to be considering the Apple Watch, only because I never really liked the raise to wake functionality of the previous editions of the Apple Watch. And I guess I still don't like that functionality on any of the modern AMOLED devices that I own. I always put them in their always on display mode, but this was the first time that was an option for an Apple Watch. And then the Series 5 also had a new built-in compass, which helped with orientation on the Maps application. And then this is when Apple actually introduced the more expensive titanium options within their watch. And then on the software side, they introduced this noise application, which let you know if you were being exposed to high decibel levels that would be dangerous. And then they actually introduced the cycle tracking application for women's menstrual cycle tracking. And then on September 18th, 2020, Apple launched the Apple Watch Series 6. The big new feature was blood oxygen saturation monitoring, or SpO2. It's actually funny now because at this point, at least in the United States, this is a feature that's been disabled due to a patent dispute. But I'm sure that Apple will eventually bring that back at some point. But anyway, this update definitely stood out to me because I felt like this was the first time that the Apple Watch, or at least the Apple Watch engineers, really nailed the GPS accuracy. I think there was probably some sort of slight update to the antenna design, or maybe more likely the algorithm for discarding bad GPS data. But for whatever reason, I just noticed a significant increase in the accuracy of this device. It wasn't horrible before, but I feel like this is the device that really nailed it. This was also the year that Apple introduced the Apple Watch SE, or Special Edition, which was basically a more affordable, it was more of like a Series 4 or Series 5 style device without the always-on display and without a few other features at a lower price point. Then on October 15th, 2021, Apple launched the Apple Watch Series 7 with an even larger display. The borders of this watch were 40% thinner, and Apple again increased the watch body size to 41 millimeters and 45 millimeters. They also made the glass a little bit thicker just to increase durability. But the thing that stood out to me the most about the Series 7 was the addition of a triathlon option. Now, to be fair, I think that this triathlon option only came with the Watch OS 9, which would have been pretty late into the Series 7's lifespan. But I remember using the Series 7 watch to test Apple's new touchless transition. So triathletes never had to hit a split button when they were racing. The watch just detected when they were done swimming or biking and just progressed it to the next sport with an automatic split. Then on September 16th, 2022, Apple launched 3 new Apple Watch devices, the Apple Watch Series 8, which added crash detection, like car crashes and things like that. The original Apple Watch Ultra, which was a new, large, more durable, premium, rugged device with about double the battery life. And the second generation of the Apple Watch SE. And I think that the Apple Watch Ultra was the real showstopper here. People definitely seem to really go crazy for this device, myself included. It is pretty large at 49 millimeters, and it definitely sits up higher on your wrist. I actually think that the biggest takeaway from the Apple Watch Ultra was just the updated design and its focus on durability. My Apple Watch Ultra 1 is actually still holding up extremely well after all of this time. And I actually found that the watch to be very accurate as far as GPS testing goes and as far as heart rate accuracy goes. And then on September 22nd, 2023, Apple had a much more mediocre update with the Apple Watch Ultra 2 and the Apple Watch Series 9. The main changes were internal with an updated system and package processor. This was the year that Apple introduced the double tap gesture, which would confirm the main button that was being displayed with just a double tap of your index finger or your thumb. It doesn't have to be your index finger, it could be any finger really. But then finally, moving on to September 9th, 2024, when Apple introduced the Apple Watch Series 10 with sleep apnea notifications, and then they bumped up the sizes by another millimeter. So now your size options are 42 millimeter or 46 millimeters. And then they also added an all-black edition of the Apple Watch Ultra 2 with a carbon diamond-like coating that to me appears to be pretty durable, at least so far in my experience. But with that very not so brief history of the Apple Watch out of the way, I thought it'd be fun to speculate on what Apple might do next, and what 3 things that we've learned from all of that history. One, Apple definitely sees their Apple Watches as continually evolving health device. Number two, Apple is definitely slowly increasing the size of these watches. After looking at all of these release dates, it's clear that, Apple also has been very consistent about this yearly release cycle. And they've been pretty consistent with that September timeframe. So I think that it's fair to say that we might see an Apple Watch Series 11 and an Apple Watch Ultra 3 this upcoming September. I'll be very curious to see if the ever-changing tariffs might actually affect pricing of these watches. But Apple almost always calls their system and package processor the S whatever. So this would be the S11. But Apple only really updates the CPU of these devices about once every 3 years or so. So I wouldn't be surprised if the processor on the new watches is largely unchanged, maybe just slightly reorganized. But the system and package processor could definitely get another bump to the number of cores used in their neural engine. I'm not actually sure when Apple is going to get around to AI on the smartwatch, but I feel pretty confident that Apple engineers are at least going to want to properly spec out these devices so that when they can potentially handle some very small LLMs or large language models on these little devices, that the hardware will be ready for those types of features. I'm in particular thinking of smart AI assistants, but we'll see. Personally, I would definitely like to see the action button come to the Series 11 and for it to get that precision start feature. That's the option to be able to wait for a solid satellite connection and avoid the 3, 2, 1 start of activities. Yes, I know that you can skip that by double tapping it, but I really want to wait for satellite connectivity and then simply press go like you can do on the Apple Watch Ultra. And yes, it's a small thing. I might be the only one that cares about it, but it seems like Apple should be able to bring that from the Apple Watch Ultra over to the Series 11. The rumors for the Apple Watch Ultra 3 have been in full swing, as always, and people are speculating that we might see a new blood pressure health monitoring feature. Sounds like it might be similar to the sleep apnea notification. So it's not going to give you specific readouts, but instead more of a general trend, and then maybe some sort of alert that you might want to talk about with your doctor. And then the Apple Watch Ultra might also get something like satellite emergency calls, similar to what you can do with your iPhone. So that I think would be pretty amazing. The update might include an update to 5G RedCap, which is a version of 5G that's designed for Internet of Things devices or IoTs. It's not quite as fast as 5G, but it uses a lot less power. And then Apple has supposedly been working on a non-invasive way to monitor blood glucose levels. My guess is that we're not going to see that for a few years, but I mean, we can stay hopeful. Now, I would really like to see a slimmer watch body case size. Maybe a little bit more battery life from Apple. And I would love to see Apple redesign the optical heart rate sensor so that they could bring back SpO2. It's not a huge deal. I feel like it's not a feature that I use a ton. It just seems odd that it's missing. But those are just a few of my quick thoughts. What do you guys think? What are some memorable moments that you guys have noticed within all of these years of owning Apple Watches? Let me know in the comments section, and we can just continue the conversation down there. Comment section is right below the video here. It's right below the like and the subscribe button down there if you guys want to check those out as well. Lastly, if you happen to be watching this video on the day that it comes out, on April 24th, be sure to close all of your rings and you'll earn a limited edition award plus 10 animated stickers and an animated badge for messages. So just a fun little gift from Apple to celebrate 10 years. But either way, Apple Watch or no watch at all, I really do hope that you guys are getting out there, and we will see you guys on the next one.